Hey guys, last video I put out, I quickly gave a little segment on companion plants and what I believe about companion plants, and I'd kind of just like to follow up today and give a more short, like a brief, but more in-depth discussion, not only about companion plants, but about the functions that certain plants play and how placing them in this area can help you get higher yields, to help you create a more diverse and rich garden. Now I'd like to start with just naming off anything here and giving an example, like this squash, for example. Squash is an annual plant. So, to give an example of a function that it is playing right now, it's completely covering the ground here. It's suppressing any other weeds. It's locking in moisture. And then at the end of the year, when it's done its full cycle of life, it's going to die back. And that's going to provide some green manure, some fodder for worms, and it's going to lay over top and almost in a way sequester carbon or nutrients that are being zapped out of the soil. The borage over here, it's bringing in pollinators. It's kind of got a longer taproot, so it's creating pathways under the ground. And the reason why I planted borage is because it is a very tough self-seeding plant, and it'll come back year after year if you just let it go to seed and die back. You'll get it in different areas. It works well as a chop and drop. It melts into the ground. These ground cherries are sprawling over. They're also creating a layer of cover, and they're giving me yields of fruit at the same time. This plant over here, butterfly weed, creates stoloniferous shoots, and it spreads, and it's bringing in lots of pollinators. I'm seeing tons of wasps on this every day, and to me, that's a great thing. People complain about wasps, but wasps are your pest control. They're awesome for that. So I like to plant things like these umbrella firs, you know, that bring in lots of different wasps and parasitic wasps. And perennial plants are among one of the most important plants in the garden, because they are creating that biomass year after year. They're getting bigger and larger, and there's always a living root in the ground providing that sugar exchange. So once you get the perennials in the ground, and once you get a system that is suitable for things like fungus or mycelium to run through, that web is now connected, and now you're getting that sugar put into the ground. There's certain weeds in the garden that I never pull, and this is one of them, vetch, nitrogen fixer. The rhizobium have a specific relationship with this plant, and the rhizobium help this plant take atmospheric nitrogen and turn it into nitrogen to feed it, and it's also putting some of that nitrogen into the soil. So all of these things play a vital role. I have my comfrey plants in. Something's been munching at them, but I have them in very dry, sandy soil that I pulled out from the swale. The stuff is like sandy loam, and when I mean like sandy loam, I mean it's practically all sand. This soil was practically all sand prior to this. I did some amending. I did sheet mulching, and I used a method that I seen online or on YouTube from a woman named Borage, and I believe she lives in Australia. She has a channel called Our Permaculture Life, and what she basically does is she does your typical sheet mulch, and instead of your last layer just being your top dressing or your top mulch, she uses newspaper before that last layer. So she puts her compost on top, which is kind of like what I did here, and then I put newspaper on top, and then I put a mulch layer on top. And that's all I'm doing. seems to work. There is some soil that was put on top of that mulch layer. I'm not really worried about it. I went to transplant some strawberries yesterday and they were just loaded with white hairs. So it's a good sign to me that this is doing exactly what I want it to do. So anyways, guys, just a quick discussion about that. It's important to understand what a plant does and its functions. You know, we see disturbed fields with things like Queen Anne's lace growing in it, and because it's growing this big root, it's loosening up that soil and making that soil conducive not only for itself but for other things to come in. And that's another reason why monoculture is failing. It's a failed attempt at growing things with high yields. You get the same amount of yields with a diverse intermixed crop. And you're also bringing in lots of different life and creating lots of biomass. I believe that's really important when it comes to making a garden. If you're going to just plant one thing, well, you're going to have a problem. Something's going to come around, maybe pests. And unless you use chemical fertilizers and you're spraying with fungicides and you're using copper and all this nonsense, you're going to have those problems. And even in, sorry, there's a bus going by. Even in a permaculture setup, there is going to be problems. That's why we have diversity, so we could have different yields throughout the time. And that's why we plant and co-plant things that bring in those beneficials. You know, I planted that yarrow over in the corner, and I only planted that not because I want to make tea, but because I want it to protect my hardy bush cherry here. In Ontario, over the last couple of years, we've had a problem with European fruit fly, and what they do is they come into the unripe fruit, they pierce a hole, they lay their eggs, and the larvae eat the fruit until it falls off. So essentially you get no harvest out of it. And the yarrow brings in parasitic wasps, which like to attack these bugs. So function is important when you're thinking about plants. All these beings here serve a purpose, and they serve multiple purposes. So even when you're looking at a weed or a plant in the ground, it does have a purpose. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching.